Okay, why don't we get started? Good afternoon and welcome to the New Asian Business Model panel. I think as you've been hearing over the past couple of days, the Asian middle class is expected to grow from about 500 million today to 3 billion by 2030. And that represents 2/3 of the global middle class and up from 1/3 today. And if you look at China and India alone, account for half of that Asian middle class by 2030 and 1/3 of the global middle class. So pretty staggering numbers. And that's going to create significant implications for companies, multinational companies, as well as opportunities and challenges. Just to put it in perspective, and if you look at General Motors, in 2004, GM sold 1 car in China for every 10 cars that was sold in the US. By 2009, that had reached parity, and in 2015, 12 cars in China for every 10 in the United States. And a more recent example, the iPhone, which launched in 2007, by 2009, 2% of Apple's iPhone sales came from China. By 2011, it was 12%, and in 2015, it was 25%. So there's a significant growth opportunity for companies that can tap into that purchasing power in these countries. Today's discussion, we're going to explore how industries and businesses can prepare for this growth in the middle class, what business models will be disrupted and how, what challenges and opportunities we can expect to see in 2030 and leading up to 2030. And we have a wide range of experts here today to address this from very different perspectives. So you'll get a really broad view on the opportunities and the challenges. I have Chris Tang, a distinguished professor from UCLA and Anderson School of Business, who's going to talk specifics about different business models and what works and what doesn't. Rohan, Deputy GM for the Wanda Group, and Wanda is building right here in LA, a pretty exciting property that you'll hear more about as well. And then we have Albert Wong, CEO of Hong Kong Science and Technology Parks, who will talk about new ways to do business from a government level and what governments are trying to do to facilitate this growth. So let's start with Chris. And Chris, we've talked a lot and heard a lot today about the boom and the growth potential in China, but we also have heard a lot about all the challenges in China. And China has been growing at 10% a year the past 30 years, and that growth is now slowing down to about 8% a year. And we heard a lot about what Andy Shih shared and others about the overhang, the zombie SOEs. So while there's a lot of growth potential, there's also a lot of challenges. So what is the answer, near term and long term, to address that?
Well, thank you. Well, in terms of the GDP growth in China, let's put it into perspective. It's been growing for more than 10% for close to 30 years. Well, even you play the blackjack, sometimes you lose a little bit, right? It could be just a minor correction, first of all. And also, in terms of the GDP in China, it's still growing around 7%. So, well, relative to the US, it is a big number. US is only growing 2%. Europe is less than 2%. So in a sense, it is still growing, the engine. Now, yes, there are some challenges, no question about it. But then, if you think about the Chinese government, as Andy pointed out earlier, the Chinese government is actually very smart. They actually has taken many different measures to actually try to stimulate the engine to keep it going. So let me just highlight 3 of them, then I get back to you. First one, I think that's in terms of job creations, also improving the financial markets, and also creating new business. The first one, I think in 2013, President Xi started the One Belt, One Road project. Now this is actually create tremendous opportunity to create jobs because you need to build railroads. Infrastructure is the best sector to create jobs. especially when the SOEs is still producing a lot of metal, the iron that no one needs. So you need to put it somewhere. So that is where you put the iron, the steel, to put it to work. And then you need the money. So where do you get the money? The Chinese government started in 2013 the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the AIIB. So they put in seed money for 1 trillion RMB, but also get other countries to invest. So the first one is the infrastructure. Second, in the financial sectors, actually the Chinese government has actually put in some efforts to improve that. First, in terms of SOEs, they know these are the liabilities, shall I say. So they actually try to encourage them to actually acquire or partner with multinational firms, such that they can actually leverage the lessons learned from other industries back into China, the SOEs. Then just 3 weeks ago, the Chinese government just approved the Shenzhen Hong Kong Stock Connect program, such that the high-tech companies, they can trade openly in the Hong Kong stock market, so such that they can receive investment for overseas. Third point, in 2015, President Xi actually realized that the engine has to change course. Instead, the factory of the world is getting more difficult because they realize that China cannot compete with other emerging markets, such as Vietnam, Cambodia, Bangladesh, in many sectors, especially in apparels. They have to change. So that's why they try to develop a new sector, which they call innovation. So actually this year, they actually declare that they want China to become an innovation-driven country in the near future. Then that's why they actually established a new commission, the Commission on the Sharing Economy in 2015, to support the sharing economy. So basically, the government is actually generating the different venues to actually create more jobs.
Great, thank you. And I agree with your point. I think innovation is going to be key. And I think the other thing you highlighted, even at 6% growth or 7% growth, China is such a vast market that it's still a market that has tremendous opportunity. And we survey our customers as well as the broader US customer base annually, and that's one of the key findings that we've come away with. Well, US companies now are saying China near term has actually for the first time fallen to number 2 in terms of market growth opportunity behind Europe in the near term, but long term continues to be the primary area of opportunity. So maybe, Chris, sticking with you, can you talk about how companies are capitalizing on these growth opportunities? What are some of the successful business models that you're seeing that have made companies successful or will make them successful going forward?
Knowing China is a planned economy, when the Chinese government speak, people follow. That is the deal. So right now, the Chinese government actually put forth with a lot of innovation initiatives to encourage universities, companies, entrepreneurs to start a new business. Yes, many of them will fail, but there are success stories. So they're using these success stories as a poster child to encourage other citizens to come forward with new ideas. So then the question is, I know in the US as well, Chinese is good in copying other people's products and service. Then always a question in the mind, can they innovate? Can they really be creative? I understand the question, but time has changed. So let me use a couple of examples. There are 4 different elements that come together that make China become a unique place for generating new innovative ideas. I call it 4 C's. In marketing, there are 3 C's: customers, companies, and competition. But in innovation, we're better. We're 4 C's. Okay? The first one is, of course, is still customer, the demand. In China, the demand is huge, not just because of population. It's a middle class, as Alan pointed out. Actually, in terms of upper middle class in China, the size is bigger than the middle class of the American middle class. There are around 109 million people in China with wealth. This is based on Credit Suisse reports. With wealth, not income, from 50,000 to 500,000 US dollars. We know that's because, just Andy say, Chinese, they don't spend, they just save the money. Unlike the Americans, we spend it first, right? That is the difference. So that means they have the money. Second, given they have money, they want something better. So they always want, they aspire to learn the new thing, try the new things. So the demand is right there. Then the supply. So how can you satisfy this kind of young generations? They have a curiosity, they have the desire for new products. Well, first, China has the capability. Why? We provided the capability because there are over 300,000 students from China, they're studying in the US. But we don't have the visa for them to stay. So where do they go? They go back home. So what do? They become your competitor. That's a problem, okay? So they have the capability, and also that now they have the know-how because the iPhone is made in China. Your Lenovo is made in China. All your cell phones, most of the cell phones made in China. They all have know-how, they have capability. That's the capability, second C. The third C, cash. Chinese governments, when they put down money, they can double down, they can afford it. If they cannot afford it, sell more properties. Cannot do it, do whatever. They have a way, right? Fourth one, the 4C, that is a very unique culture. Chinese is a very resilient nation because if you're not resilient, there are not that many of them, right? So they're very resilient, they are hungry, they want to become successful person. Could be entrepreneurs, could be new development and all this. So basically these 4 C's, the capability, cash, culture, and customers drive, these 4 factors drive the innovation growth in China. Let me give you 2 examples about really to showcase the uniqueness of the innovations that have happened in China. The first one, yes, would be like what's it, Clark? Before lunch, Mr. Clark? Duncan. Yes, okay. Thank you. Duncan talked about Alibaba. The book is fantastic. Now, but I can actually add a couple more comments. Why was Alibaba so successful that other companies cannot be so successful? Okay, there were discussion about, okay, maybe not the level playing field. They discriminate against international companies. But even in China, they're the only one. No one come close. Then what did they do that other people cannot do? Because Chinese can copy from other Chinese too, right? But they can't. I tell you why. Because Alibaba, they have a very unique business model that is extremely difficult to copy. Even in terms of Amazon, even many they cannot do. Why? Because I call it they have an ecosystem strategy. Ecosystem, that means that they have to actually complete the entire Great Wall of China. There's no gap in between. You cannot enter it. They have the Alipay for the payment first. That is the key driver. Because a lot of the Chinese consumers have no credit cards, and also they don't trust the credit cards. They don't really trust the bank. And there's also no easy way. Once you get the Alipay, they get 80% of the market share. Now you can buy things. Before, you don't have the wallet. If there's no wallet, no money, no talk. So once you have the money, now we're talking. Now we have product to sell to you. I can make it easier. They have to B2B, B2C, C2C, O2O. They've done them all. Not only that, they also have the delivery service. The logistics companies, China, they actually include that. So basically, it's a complete ecosystem that you cannot beat. Second model, so that's Alibaba. The second one, I know that I predicted Uber will exit China last year in my article in Fortune magazine. Why? My conclusion is not because of technology. Actually, I love Uber. The Uber technology is fantastic, much better than Didi. But then why did they lose? They always wonder. Then, of course, America said, well, they screw us. That's why. It's unfair competition in all this. Not true, actually. Actually, Uber lost to Didi is not because of technology. It's because one simple thing. Actually, they lost to WeChat. Because they did not understand how the Chinese consumers take taxis. Well, in China, actually, the number of smartphone users is bigger than the population in the entire United States. There's 600 million smartphone users. Once with a smartphone, if they want to call the taxis, they need to pay, right? Well, it's embedded in WeChat. They like to chat first. Once you chat, it's, oh, should we meet for dinner? Yes. Then I need to call a cab. Then how do you do that? It's inside WeChat. Then once you get into WeChat, it's Didi. Then I said, well, you need to pay the taxi driver. No, no worries. The Alipay or the WeChat Pay is inside WeChat. So it's already embedded. It's locked in. Remember Capital One's slogan? What's in your wallet? It's WeChat, not Uber. So in that case, Uber never had a chance. That's why they only get 2 or 3% market share. End of story. After you lose a couple of $1 billion, you have to get out. Right now, there's another problem. We'll leave it later. But I think that overall, WeChat has the complete ecosystem strategy. You can shop JD.com on the WeChat platform. You can buy, you can give friends money, you can pay utility bill, you can do virtually anything without leaving the app. So for every single transactions, for WeChat Pay, they take the cut. Better, they can do cross-platform promotion. That means that you can use a WeChat, pay the Didi, and say, oh, do you want to go to KFC? If you go to KFC, there's a 5 RMB discount. You're right there already because they know where you are. Exactly. So that's why once you have a complete ecosystem, it's difficult to beat. That's why I call this is truly the Great Wall of China without the gap in between. So I should stop here.
Thank you. That's fascinating. Excellent. And I will come back to you at the end to share more of those stories. I would point out that Wanda is another good example of a success story, and maybe Rohan, you can share more of that. Wanda is the largest property company in the world. Wanda, maybe a little less known, has a big strategic push in 2 other industries, financial services, as well as the cultural industry. So maybe, Rohan, you can share more about what Wanda is doing to expand globally across those different businesses.
Happy to. Thank you, Alan. And I'm not sure if I have quite the 4 C's, the 5 C's, or anything to match Chris's fantastic remarks there. But the Wanda Group is a fascinating organization. And it's one that perhaps in these circles is more known, but in the broader sense here in the Californian economy, so to speak, it's reasonably under the radar, surprisingly so. But the group originally, in its outset, was traditionally a real estate company. It is China's largest commercial real estate company. It competes almost fluctuates on a weekly basis in terms of its size of its global portfolio with a company like Blackstone. If Blackstone buys a portfolio one week, perhaps it's bigger than Wanda. If it sells one, perhaps it's less than Wanda. And that's based on just the sheer physical footprint of that portfolio. Valuation is a different thing, but just sheer size, we compete on that type of scale, which is remarkable. So the Wanda Group's footprints, typically in the real estate field, very much in the tone of Chris was mentioning, in that ecosystem style. So the company would traditionally build large, what they would call its malls, mega malls. And this would be targeting at the Chinese consumer, the growing middle class of consumer. Many years ago, the organization set out to really have a dominant share in the mall space. And as it successfully built these large malls, and they spread around, starting out at the first tier cities, and then they spread further and further into second and third tier cities, they brought with them a number of their own businesses. So they became not just the developer of the real estate, but then also the key tenants, the key occupiers of these major malls in its own department stores. They owned and operated their own cinema chain. They owned and operated their own karaoke bars, a key important ingredient in the entertainment cycle in a Chinese mall. So they had the capacity and the ability to bring together all the important component pieces for such a large mall. And they would do that by going into new third-tier cities, fourth-tier cities, and these centers, these Wanda malls, Wanda Guangchang, would become the center of the city. And third-tier cities would be praying that these guys, the Wanda Group, would bring them all to their cities. So they would become inherently in the best location. The land would be acquired at an attractive price. And this type of development went on for many years, and extremely successfully. But after a while, that business model reaches a point of maturity, reaches a point of saturation, where the room for growth, to maintain the growth expectations that our chairman has aggressively set, was hard to achieve just by that traditional real estate model. So they looked to expand, and they expanded in a very dramatic fashion. The organization really about 5 or 6 years ago pivoted very significantly and very strategically into other sectors that weren't just clustered around its own mall developments. These were industries that far more wide-reaching, that traditionally you would not see a large real estate company have any business being in. But the Wanda Group was very successfully able to further expand itself into industries such as film and media via its ownership and development of cinema chains, not just in China but around the world, into sports, both in sports team ownership, sponsorship, broadcast rights, event production. They've expanded into the hotel business. More and more so they're expanding into the luxury goods sector. You've mentioned a few businesses up here on the financial services, the e-commerce side. They have a very robust brick and mortar retail chain. They've expanded aggressively into the e-commerce side of the business. You mentioned the WeChat with its pop-up of a 5% discount on a mobile app. The Wanda Group has a very similar app that can pick up where you are, your location-based sensor. If you're in the vicinity of the mall, it sends you notifications of discounts running here, movie times, seating, you book at a restaurant, whatever it may be. So the group has expanded beyond what was really a business model targeting the consumables of that growing middle class. Instead of just providing a hub and a location to buy stuff, they've now expanded its business to provide experiences. So the organization is now not just looking to sell, to provide real estate to sell products, but they're looking to provide experiences. We have a huge division in theme parks. We're building enormous amounts of theme parks across China. Our hotels and resorts business is expanding very rapidly. We're now actually the world's largest owner of 5-star hotels. So there are many different sectors whereby we're not just, as I mentioned, not just targeting the sale of consumables, of goods, but actually providing experiences. And that's a major shift. And I think that's one that as you see the middle class continue to rise, they're not just looking at the next thing to purchase. They're moving higher up on that consumer scale and looking to have these new lifestyle experiences. So whether it's taking the family on a holiday trip to go to a resort or a theme park, those are facilities and infrastructure, entertainment infrastructure, which previously in China didn't really exist, save for 1 or 2 old bad theme parks in Shanghai that have been around for many years, and now we see Disney now there. It's fantastic. So there are now more and more abilities and locations for the growing middle class to enjoy, and that's really been a powerful shift.
Great. That's very exciting. It's very exciting. So how does your property at 1 Beverly Hills fit into the strategy? And I know you're also building a large property in Chicago.
Sure. So that's really my focus. The other sectors that I mentioned, the organization is involved in a wide array of fascinating industries. I personally love to be more involved in the sports area perhaps, but my focus is on real estate. And so one of the areas that the Wanda Group, or the area that the Wanda Group within its real estate sector has chosen to bring to the international markets is hotel development. We're not looking to replicate our successful mall development in the international market. That's a very saturated market. But the hotel market is one that's very interesting, and it's one that we're expanding right now. And that's why we acquired a property, a very famous property just a little further east of here, right behind the corner of where Wilshire Boulevard meets Santa Monica, right behind the Beverly Hilton, an old department store that many of you may know of, the Robinson's May site. A famous piece of dirt that traded hands multiple times over the past 10, 15 years. Over $1 billion has been spent on that land alone. And we acquired the rights to develop there in the summer of 2014. It was a very public auction process, bid process, and we were very fortunate to win out in that acquisition. And we've now set this location, which we have now rebranded to be known as 1 Beverly Hills. And we're seeking to make amendments to the zoning approvals that were on that piece of property. So that was zoned back in 2008 it had approvals to build 235 luxury condo units. And we're trying to make an amendment right now, which is a process that we've been going through for the past 18 months, to amend those 235 condos to remove 42 of those units and in their place introduce a new Wanda branded hotel. So we're sticking within the original structure of the building that was approved. We're sticking with the original footprint, the square footage, the massing, the overall layout remains exactly the same, but we're introducing a slightly new function, which is the introduction of our hotel. And by doing that, we open the property up, what was once a completely private property, accessible only by owners of units there. We now welcome in the public. The public can enjoy the many areas of green space that we have throughout the property, as well as a remarkable rooftop, which we'll be building. We're taking out one of the areas of condos that we're replacing was the penthouse units on one of the buildings. We're now creating this remarkable indoor-outdoor amenity space that will be open to the public. It'll be open to hotel guests and to residents who live within the property. So that will be, if you can picture yourself, 14 stories up, overlooking the LA Country Club, looking west on an afternoon like this. You have unobstructed views from Beverly Hills all the way over West LA to here at the Pacific Ocean. So that's I believe will be a fantastic addition to the luxury condo market in the entire Los Angeles, let alone Beverly Hills. But you'll also be able to have and enjoy hotel services within your condo unit. So a model similar to the Montage in Beverly Hills, if you're familiar with that, but on a larger scale. So we would have 134 hotel rooms and 193 condo units is our plan. We had submitted our application to the City of Beverly Hills in June of last year. It's in its final stages of approval right now. We've been at this for now about 18 months. We've done an entire California Environmental Quality Act, a CEQA review, which if anyone's in the real estate industry knows how much fun that is. And we are in our final stages now of Beverly Hills City review and approval. So fingers crossed if we get through this during this calendar year, we'll be able to commence construction early next year and have One Beverly Hills, the hotel and residences, open by 2020.
Excellent, excellent. Are you taking any early bird applications and early bird discounts?
For friends in the room, why not? Thank you, Alan. Put me on
Special
the spot.
privilege for being in the room. Okay, let's switch gears now and understand this from a government perspective and what governments are doing to help enable and support companies and industries. Albert, I'll turn to you. This is your area of expertise. If you can share how Hong Kong is looking at this and what Hong Kong is doing to position itself and its industries for this Asian middle class.
Sure. I don't know if I can talk about government because I don't have a background with government. The Hong Kong Science Park, let me do a little bit of promotion. Hong Kong Science Park is actually a government setup. It has been set up 15 years ago to promote innovation, technology, R&D. We wanted to create an ecosystem for people to come in to do research and development. Today, we have about 600 companies in the park with about 13,000 people working there. Of the 600 companies, we have about 250 startups. We run an incubation program. Although it's a government setup, I'm really, well, I think I can talk a little bit about my background and you understand why, what is going on. I have a background, I come from Hong Kong, educated in Hong Kong, but I have never worked in Hong Kong. I work in the US, I work in China, I worked for GE for 15 years, never worked for the government. But they recruited me to run the science park. So the government wants to bring in some commercial technology background to kind of move the government setup into a certain different direction. I think you can see similar things going on in many cities around Asia. Professor Tang, Chris Chang was talking about China pushing for innovation and entrepreneurism. Actually, if you look at, if you listen to Premier Li Keqiang talking about it last year, he's strongly pushing for innovation by the mass and entrepreneurship and entrepreneurialism. That's a mouthful. Entrepreneurialism by the mass. So in other words, it's not just entrepreneurialism, but technology, innovation, entrepreneurialism. And you're seeing these things coming up in a lot of places in Asia: Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong, China, Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen. Because I think we just heard the other speaker talking about China. There's three things about the economies. One is the state-owned enterprises, and then second is the multinationals, and then thirdly is the startups. I used to work for multinational for all my life, and I'm now getting into this startup thing. And you can see that this is a very important pillar for the cities in all of Asia. The governments are doing a lot of things, including setting up infrastructures like the Science Park in Hong Kong, or the Zhongguancun in Beijing, or the Zhangjiang in Shanghai. The infrastructure support, policy support, including like tax incentive when you do R&Ds. And then the Hong Kong government is putting up a lot of efforts in bringing up VCs, investment fund, because it depends on the country's policy. For example, Singapore has a lot of money to invest directly into technology. For cities like Hong Kong, we don't do that. We just set up the infrastructure and let you live or die. So there are places like Shanghai or Shenzhen or Singapore where the government is heavily involved, or in places like Hong Kong that kind of laissez-faire and just bring in someone like me to run the park and try to encourage innovation and technology. But the key is that in the next 10, 20 years, this startup, this entrepreneur will be making a big difference to all of Asia's cities. If you look around the Asian cities, I just look at it in the past months or so. The only place I think that you don't hear so much about startup entrepreneurism is probably Japan. You hear about entrepreneurism in China, Singapore, Thailand, everywhere. I think people are seeing that this is the trend for the younger generation because there's just not enough jobs from the big companies, from multinationals. And by the way, if you look at the success of the Silicon Valley, that's the trend to go. Now, the other thing that we're looking at is that when you think about the young startup, we think about making an app, making a mobile app, doing a software solutions. But actually, there are a lot of things going on in Hong Kong and in China that is making real products. For example, in this Hong Kong Science Park, we have 5 different clusters. IT is only one of them. We do biotech, we do electronics, green tech, and material research. And you'll be surprised that there's a lot of engineers and young startups that are coming to Hong Kong from China, from multinational, from other countries, to Hong Kong and South China to do things like that. So think about startup entrepreneurism, not just with making an app, a simple, basic stuff, 1 or 2 guys, but some of them doing, in my opinion, the way I call it, real stuff.
Great.
With all respect to the others.
Thank you. Can you share 1 or 2 examples of innovative technologies that are being developed by some of your companies?
Yeah, there are a lot of things going on. Well, we do, one of the surprising things that happens in Hong Kong is biotech is coming up very quickly in Hong Kong for various reasons. One of them is that China is a big market. And biotech in China is a problem. You know, we are doing a lot of stem cell research in Hong Kong. Surprisingly, I mean, I don't have a background in stem cell, but in the past few months, I started to learn that stem cell research is coming a big way. Personalized medicines, genomics, these kind of things are coming up very, very quickly, and those have to do with data analytics. Because the thing about the genomics, if you talk about analyzing a human genes, if you talk about 10 years ago, it takes 2 weeks to analyze the gene. Today in Hong Kong Science Park, in many places, they will do it overnight, 3-4 hours. And today is the personalized diagnostic medicine. There's a number of companies in the Science Park that they can take a gene, take your blood, and analyze the gene and tell you, well, for example, one of the companies we do is that they can take the blood from the mother and do a prenatal screening through the genetic analysis. And he's developing this technology into cancer screening. For something like $1,500 US, you can do a genetic screen through your blood and tell you that whether or not you have a certain type of cancer. This is happening all over the world. Stem cell, personalized medicine, personal diagnostics, this is happening really quickly. Partly because of the advance in biomedical stem cell genomic research, and partly also because of the ability to analyze a lot of data. Because when you think about this genetic data, there's a lot of data. How do you make data into information and information into intelligence? This is how the world is going to change. And we're seeing it in Hong Kong, in many parts of Asia.
Great, great, excellent. So we've heard a lot about the opportunities, and I'd like to come back, and I know Chris touched on some of the challenges, and there certainly are a lot of challenges. So maybe, Chris, if you can elaborate a little more. The US technology companies in particular have not been successful, and you shared some of your thoughts on that. There are other companies, when you look at Apple, you look at General Motors, it appears that they've been successful, at least up to now, and can they continue to drive that success in these markets as they expand? But what are some of the challenges that you see, and how should companies address those?
In terms of challenges, let me name two of them, and then I'll talk about opportunities, because I don't like to talk about challenges without opportunities. First, I think that in terms of, we have to come to terms that we are different. We have to embrace diversity. So you think about in terms of different culture, the East versus West. No culture is the best, and no culture is the worst. Then the question, how can we leverage the strength of each part? So let me use a very simple example. In the US, even maybe in the West, we focus on litigation first, then arbitration second. If this doesn't work, negotiation. But in the Eastern culture, we go the reverse order. That's why we call it 情理法. You first try to negotiate first. And then if this doesn't work, then you go for arbitration. If it still doesn't work, the last resort is litigation. So you can see that it's both culture from two different extremes. So that's one of the challenges, right? In terms of being a business partners. Second is also the legal framework. Yes, Americans, when they work in China, say, wow, the law is a mess. I don't understand what is legal, what's not legal. I said, you never know, right? So Americans feel extremely uncomfortable to operate in that kind of environment. But that's the way it is. But on the other hand, yes, when the legal system is not well spelled out, it spells opportunity. That means it's not illegal, maybe it's okay to do it. But the Americans say, well, is it legal? I said, I don't know, try it first, right? So in that case, it really, because I believe that is the spirit of entrepreneurship. If you cross all the T dot the I, by the time you cross all the T dot the I, your competitors already started the company already. Okay, now let me talk about opportunities. There are a lot of opportunities. The first one is short term. We really need, in terms of try to collaborate with different culture and also try to respect different culture, and such that you can leverage the strength of different systems to build a better system, right? So I think that is why I think that still may be cliche, but I think that the spirit of think global and act local is still very important. It sounds so obvious, but let me give you a few examples that it still doesn't work. First, I have one of my former students work for Dell in China. Dell's claim to fame is cut the middleman, sell direct. Then the employee said that, sir, it won't work. Mr. Dell, it won't work. He said, well, that is our claim to fame, sell direct, right? Well, guess what? It did not work. Why? For a notebook computer, it costs 10,000 RMB. The Chinese consumer need to touch it and compare against Sony, against HP, against Lenovo, Huawei, whatever. They want to see, well, why is Dell so much better? Because they're all made in China, right? So, of course, it didn't work. Then went on 3 years. Then they said, well, they have to find a consulting firm to investigate. How come it's not selling? Well, guess what they find? Because the direct sale won't work. So that's what they learn. So that means that they have to think global and act local. That is the same example about the Uber versus Didi example. Second one, in terms of the medium term. So you think about in terms of the development, the leaders, the global leaders in the future. Based on my discussion with many executives, I learned from them. There's one common theme I would like to share with you. What they find is that there's a lack of training and development program. that will develop our next generation global leaders truly can think global and act local. It's not like you stay in the presidential suite for 2 weeks and then you say, well, you have the on-the-ground experience. I don't mean that. You have to be there and work. So basically this is what I learned from them, and that's how I have the privilege to found the UCLA NUS program, Executive MBA program. And in the audience were 4 of our participants joining this program, the graduate piece. Basically, this program is provided unparalleled learning experience. We grouped 40 people who work and live in different countries, 20 different countries. We grouped them together. But we have the on-the-ground experiential learning experience. In China, in India, in Singapore, and Los Angeles. We'll work on international projects or with the on-the-ground experience. That's what it takes. And in some cases, they form partnership. They run business in different countries. This is what it takes. But there are very few programs provide this kind of experience. And that's why we're very lucky that to have this kind of recognition by the Financial Times and The Economist. It was ranked number 4 and number 5 in the last couple of years. So if you're interested, the brochure is in the lobby. So I should end it there. So there are opportunities, okay?
Well, this was a rewarding panel because you can come away with a property, you can come away with education. So great. Why don't we open it up? We have about 5 minutes left. We can open it up for a couple of questions.
Yes, I have a question for Mr. Wong. I'm curious to learn that Hong Kong has this science park which attracted 600 plus companies. But if the government is not offering any kind of subsidies, tax or otherwise, how are you going to compete with nearby countries, nearby cities, realizing that Hong Kong has very high property prices and it's hard to find good labor?
Yeah, this is what I've been telling the government all the time. So it is a struggle. The way I look at it is that Hong Kong has to do innovation technology, not because it's sexy, because it's survival. We have to do it. The Hong Kong government is doing a lot of work. There is actually a studies about a month ago on the Global Innovation Index. Hong Kong is dropping from number 4 to 10 to 14th. So we're getting way below. But there are 2 other indexes to Hong Kong. One is the innovation input. Hong Kong ranked number 2. Innovation output, Hong Kong ranked number 26. All right, 2, input stands for infrastructure, talent availability, environment, market, that kind of things. Whatever that is available. So we rank number 2. Output stands for creativity, commercialization. Government input has never been in that kind of innovation index. But my argument is that, look at Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley has no government incentive. It's all about investment, VCs. The investors will prune the bad companies and bring up the good companies. So the thing that I could do is to bring in more investment, more help to the companies to help them grow. Government will do something, but not in a scale like Shenzhen or Singapore. We will never do things like that. It's the same as Silicon Valley. Well, I don't want to compare with Silicon Valley because they've been around so long, but I think the real growth from innovation, technology, entrepreneurism does not come from government. I would even argue the government should stay away from it, no more than just set up the ecosystem, but to bring in the investors. That's my only answer to that.
Do you offer any rental subsidies?
No, it's market rent. It's very expensive. But there's people, but we have 90% occupancy. Because this is Hong Kong. Hong Kong talk about fairness. We don't want to talk about tilted, playing field. Hong Kong is too transparent. So this is our problem, right? If you go to Shenzhen, if you go to China, I worked in China for 20 years. If you're a GE, they will give you everything, right? But in Hong Kong, we don't do anything like that. It's tough.
Okay, one very quick question. We got a minute.
Professor Tang, WeChat's owned by Tencent. is it early innings on that company or a long-term opportunity?
The earnings for WeChat or Tencent?
For the holding company.
Tencent is doing extremely well. In terms of online games, it's fantastic. I think they already trade in the US. So in terms of WeChat, in terms of the WeChat payments, they are actually they are going to be a replacement of credit cards. In China, I think in the future, they don't even need credit cards. WeChat, Alipay is their credit card. You can see how big the market is.
If you don't have one, get an account. I have one. Seriously, even it's working in the US even now.
Yes, you have to register with your credit card. It's just like any mobile payments.
Question is for Rohan. I was very interested to hear that Wanda Group is trying to launch its own luxury hotel brand as part of the One Beverly Hills development. And you're right next to the Waldorf Astoria that's coming up, and then the Hilton, which are very recognized brands. So is this kind of the direction of the Wanda Group to acquire luxury brands and launch its own branding, given that China hasn't really been active in the space in general, or we're going to start to see more of this?
So the hotel that we're bringing to the international market will be our own brand. It's a Wanda branded hotel. We own 85 hotels across China right now. Approximately 50 of those are actually Wanda branded hotels. They're at the 4.5, 5-star, 6-star level. In the international market, we're bringing the 5-star offering to locations like here in Beverly Hills. We're building right now in London. We have a 90-story tower going up right now in Chicago. It's called the Vista Chicago. We have developments underway in Sydney, right on the Sydney Harbour, as well as the Gold Coast in Australia. So each of these international locations are going to be international outposts of the Wanda hotel brand, and the aspiration is to compete on the level of those top-tier hotel brands that are out there today. So Four Seasons, Peninsula. You mentioned the Waldorf Astoria. It's certainly making a push to try and revitalize its positioning in that market space. But that is the goal. That's the objective. Individually, on a property-by-property basis, when you look at 5-star hotels around the world, perhaps on an individual asset basis, it's difficult to make one project work. But you look at the valuation, for example, that a Four Seasons gets, and the totality of all those operating businesses together really lift that brand, really lift that valuation. So that's the goal: is to compete on that same, whether it be Mandarin Oriental or Peninsula, like I mentioned, at that echelon. And every property that we're building in the international market will be tailored to the international, or its local. Sorry, I should say its local marketplace. So here in Beverly Hills, we're not looking to replicate our incredible but still Chinese-focused hotels. We're not bringing that to Beverly Hills. We're building a hotel for this local market, designed by Richard Meyer and Partners, who are the lead architect on our whole project. So that's our goal.
Thank you, Alan, Rohan, Chris, and Albert, very much. That was a fascinating panel, very popular panel.